Greetings, viewers. I'm working on my truck. It's a 1990 Chevy C1500, and my brake pedal isn't what I'd hope it would be. I've gone around, I've adjusted the rear brakes, I had to replace one of the wheel cylinders that was leaking. I also serviced the front brakes, and I still don't quite have the brake pedal that I want. I've even also gone around and bled all four wheels to make sure there was no air in the system. Leaves me with replacing the master cylinder. It wasn't that expensive. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of replacing a master cylinder on a truck of this type. There will be some fluid that will leak out when we remove the master cylinder. Therefore, I'm going to put this oil catch pan underneath to catch the stuff that drips out. Here's the new master cylinder. It does not come with a reservoir, but it does come with new O-rings for the reservoir. And I'm happy about that because under here it looks like one of them might be leaking a little bit. So I only need this piece, but I do need to swap over the reservoir, which I'll do after I take it off. I strongly recommend the use of a line wrench when loosening fittings of this type. It's a much more secure way to do it, and you lessen the risk of rounding off the fastener here. I'm just gonna loosen these up to get them started, and then I'm gonna loosen the master cylinder from the brake booster, and then I'll come and take these off the rest of the way. But step one would be to make sure that these come loose. These are 14 millimeter, by the way. They're coming loose fine. A little bit of penetrating oil, if they don't, would probably be helpful. Now I'll get these, which are 15 millimeter. I want to make short work of them with my impact. After I remove the lines from the master cylinder, the lines will have a tendency to bleed out or leak a little bit while I bench bleed the new master cylinder. So in order to prevent too much of this from happening, I'm going to use some of these plugs to plug off the ends of the lines to minimize the amount of fluid loss. Now I'll remove the lines from the master cylinder. It's really nice working on something like this that isn't all corroded. Super helpful. Now I can pull the lines out, and I have a master cylinder. And this is how I will use those plugs to prevent more fluid loss and also from any contaminants getting into the system. I'm going to empty the reservoir out before I try to remove it. Kind of looks to me like it just fits in there to where it just sort of slides down into the O-rings, but I've got to be very careful not to break the plastic. All right, I'm going to move the old master cylinder from the vise, set it over in my oil drain to drain, because this thing needs to be returned as a core. This might be worth some money, so don't throw it away. Now I'll remove the old seals off the reservoir, which seems almost as difficult as getting these out of the master cylinder. This seems like a more appropriate tool. I'm just going to use brake clean the inside of this out, and I'm going to wipe it out with a rag for the remainder. Eric O would be proud of me for using so much brake clean. I'm going to take my new master, mount it in the vise. I have a little bit of silicone spray. I'm trying not to get it in the reservoir itself. Trying just to keep it on here. That's how you do it. Leave the O-rings in. Sweet, now we're ready to bench bleed. Now what do I mean by bench bleeding? Well, it's probably the most important part of this whole task, because if you don't bleed out the master cylinder, any air that's in it here, it will take you forever to bleed the brakes on the vehicle. In fact, you may only have to bench bleed it and bleed at the lines at the master, and you may be fine. In fact, that's how it often works out for me. In order to bench bleed, first remove the plugs, which may be in the master on the side like this, and save them if you have a core especially, because you can put those inside the core when you go to return it and it won't leak out inside the box. Next step is to fill the reservoirs. You don't have to fill them all the way, just get them filled up. So I strongly recommend that you reinstall the cap. And in this case, I probably also should have mentioned this system takes DOT3 brake fluid. So use whatever it calls for on the cap. Reinstall the master cylinder cap. So when you bench bleed, you're basically going to act as the push rod of the master cylinder. And you have to be careful. There may be some resistance when you first start pushing in, so it may come squirting out on you, so be careful of that. So you want to apply even pressure, like I said, in this area here, and also hold your fingers over these holes. Now they do have a special tool that has fittings that attach to here and route back up into the reservoir. You can use those, that's fine. I'm just going to use my fingers, and I have this trash can positioned underneath to catch any fluid that's going to be obviously coming out. You're going to push this piston in, and then you want to seal off the opening when you release. That way it doesn't draw air back in. That's the whole point. And I'll take the screwdriver, push in here, and hopefully it won't come spraying out. And I'm going to do that until fluid starts coming out in both ports. All right, thankfully it's not coming out too hard. All right, I've just about bottomed out, so I'm going to seal it off and then release. And I'll repeat this process until I start seeing fluid out of this one. Starting to come out that second opening. Awesome, it's coming out both openings. I'm going to temporarily reinstall the plugs and the ports to keep it from drawing in air like I just heard it right there. Maybe top off a little more. I would get at least 2 of these things of brake fluid if they're this size. Let's get this on the truck. Now when you transfer this to the vehicle, if you have nice paint like I do, definitely keep the brake fluid away from the paint. I'm using a fender cover to help prevent any brake fluid getting onto the paint. The brake fluid will damage the paint. So be sure if you get any brake fluid on there, you clean it off immediately and do whatever you can to avoid getting it there in the first place. I'm just going to position it first. I like to start my lines first because I don't want it all bleeding out on me. Plus, you have some wiggle room when it's like this. If you fasten the master cylinder to the booster first, you don't have this kind of flexibility to get threads started like I do here. And that can be very beneficial for you. I'm just going to snug these down. I don't need to tighten them up all the way because we still need to bleed it. Now for the fasteners that hold it to the booster. And I know I took these off with an impact, but I'm going to run them down by hand. Another way to do this might be to come in under the long straight extension. I chose this swivel socket, so I had flexibility, but if you don't have a swivel socket, you can just as easily go in under like I did here. Now comes the part where I'm going to bleed the master here at the lines. I've got cameraman Derek in the cab, and he's going to activate the brake pedal for me, and I'm going to bleed out right here at these lines. Probably going to start with this front one since that one seems to bleed out the easiest. But go ahead, Derek, pump it up a few times. All right, hold. And it's just gonna bleed out like you see there. And seal it. And I'm gonna go get some fresh brake fluid and I'll be right back. I wanna top this master cylinder off, make sure it doesn't run dry, because if it does run dry, you gotta start over. Now that we have it topped off, we're gonna continue the process. Okay, Derek, pump it up a few times. All right, hold it. Whoa. That was messy. All right, pump it up. All right, hold it. This is why you have that drip pan underneath. You can put a rag or some sort of catch underneath here if you'd like. I'm going to clean the whole area with Brake Clean thoroughly when I'm done. But do be aware that there will make a mess. All right, pump it up. All right, hold it. There was a little bit of air there. Okay, doesn't look like we're getting any more air out of this area. How's that pedal feel, Derek?
Feels solid.
Really? Better than it did?
Yeah.
That sounds like progress. I like progress. All right, well, go ahead and start it up and see how it feels. All right, turn it off. Okay, well, this is the part where you may need to go around and bleed all four wheels. My personal preference, and I know this goes against a lot of thinking on this matter, is I like to do left front, right front, left rear. Some people like to do just the opposite and start in the rear. It's really your preference. But for now, I'm going to clean all of this up and go around the wheels and see if I can find any air coming out of any of those bleeders. So after cleaning everything up, I went around to all four wheels and checked for any air in the system, and honestly, there wasn't any. I normally don't have an issue when I bench bleed master cylinders and bleed them this way. It's not going to hurt to go around and check everything, but I guess the burning question is, did that solve the problem of the spongy brake pedal on my 1990 C1500? No, it did not. In fact, it feels exactly the same as it did before I got started. Now, I've talked to some people about this, and apparently the solution is to install a later model master cylinder and brake booster, and that solves the problem. I'll put links in the description to those part numbers. I haven't tried it in this video, and I haven't tried it here, obviously. I'm sort of on the fence as to what I'm doing with this truck. I may make it into a performance truck and possibly upgrade my entire braking system, or I'll go the less expensive route and do exactly as I stated and replace the booster and the master cylinder with later model versions. Perhaps that will solve the problem. But if you're looking to solve a problem of a spongy brake pedal on this truck, you might want to go that route instead. The parts aren't that expensive. I think I priced them out and they came out to about 160 bucks for both the booster and the master. Cool thing about GM is parts are inexpensive and relatively easy to find. I'll put links in the description, as I said, to that, along with additional information and videos that could possibly help you that go along with this video. So if you have questions, please check there. If you have automotive questions not covered in this video, please go to EricTheCarGuy.com, which is also linked in the description. Aside from that, close my videos with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye. If you don't put your fingers here, brake fluid's going to squirt across the shop. Just saying. Bench bleeding the master. All right, push in. Which, that was an awful lot of brake fluid.